Welcome to Unholy Inquiry, where each tale leads you deeper into a labyrinth of mystery waiting to be uncovered. This time, join us as we delve into Hercule Poirot and the Bride Who Burned Alone, a fan-crafted story that pays homage to the genius and sophistication of Agatha Christie's iconic detective, Hercule Poirot. We are thrilled to have you with us on this captivating journey. Share your thoughts, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you spot any details we missed, your feedback is invaluable. Together, let's continue to shape even more thrilling enigmas. Chapter 1. The Fire That Screamed Her Name. She vanished in smoke, but the scream lingered. The scream tore through the night like a blade through velvet, shrill, feminine, desperate. Then came the roar of fire. It bloomed against the darkened sky, orange and furious, as if the very air had turned to rage. The wedding marquee was an inferno within seconds. The satin ribbons melted first, then the silk veils, then the bride. They said her name was Liliane Bellamy, a name now scorched into the whispers of the villagers of Whitehaven by Sea, and into the nightmares of those who watched her burn. She had just finished rehearsing her vows when the fire began. The tent collapsed before anyone could reach her, and yet several guests would swear, trembling, that even after the flames consumed the white canopy, after the screams had died into cinders, hers went on, screaming from within the smoke. I arrived the following morning. It was a bitter dawn, the wind snarling from the sea like an old god awakened. The marquee was nothing but skeletal poles and coiled black ash, still whispering smoke into the grey sky. Burnt petals clung to the gravel like crushed confetti. The scent of roses and char had not yet cleared, and nor had the taste of fear. I walked past a scorched wedding cake still on its silver stand, grotesquely melted on. One side, the bride and groom figurines fallen into the icing like slain ghosts. And there, standing at the edge of the debris, with hollow eyes, was Inspector Merrick. "Poirot," he said quietly, as if names might offend the dead. "She was alone inside. We tried. The groom tried." I surveyed the wreckage slowly. "You say it began suddenly?" "Like the match struck hell itself," he muttered. "Ah, but fire," I thought. "It obeys its own nature. It feeds, it needs, and yet it is never truly sudden, n'est-ce pas? There is always something combustible, someone." The bride, Liliane Bellamy, was 26, heiress to a vanished fortune. Her father, Augustus Bellamy, died mysteriously in Tangier a year prior. Her mother, estranged and absent. Liliane had returned to England 2 months ago, with a quiet fiancé and a hunger to forget. Her wedding was small, but exquisite. A white cliffside estate, ivy climbing the stone walls, bells from the village chapel. But now it had a ghost in a charred veil. The guests, of course, were still here. Mourning, yes, but also lingering. Mourning, Poirot has observed, does not always come free from performance. I began with the groom. Edgar Morton stood beside the garden's blackened trellis, a single unburnt lily in his hand, still in yesterday's suit. His face, drawn, hollow, red-rimmed at the eyes, bore the mask of tragedy. And yet, it was too still. "She was everything," he whispered. "You must believe me." "I believe in little, monsieur," I said gently. "I observe, I reason, I conclude. Now tell me, why did you run into the fire, and then turn back?" He flinched. What? Who told you that?" "Your shoes," I said, pointing. "The left sole is seared, the right is untouched. You took one step forward, then back, You hesitated. He stared at me, lips slightly parted. She was already screaming, he murmured. I couldn't see her. I thought, what if she was already gone? Or what if, I said quietly, you knew she was never inside? He said nothing. I turned next to the maid of honor, Isabel Harrow. Childhood friend, eyes too quick, posture too poised, words always laced with visible effort. She kept pressing a lace handkerchief to her lips, even when she wasn't crying. She was nervous about something, Isabel said. Not the wedding, something else. She kept locking the drawer of her writing desk. And you, mademoiselle, did you ever try the lock? She stiffened. Of course not. Of course, I said, smiling slightly, because you knew it was already broken. Her silence spoke loudly. I noted it. Later, I watched the Reverend, Father Wilkes, standing alone by the chapel gate, fingering his collar, eyes darting toward the cliff. His voice trembled when he greeted me. It was God's will, he said. Some souls are taken before their vows. Or silenced before a secret can be confessed, I replied. He looked at me sharply. I don't know what you mean. Ah, but he did. Poirot always sees when a man stumbles over his lies like a drunk over a hymn. That evening, I requested permission to examine the estate. Liliane's chambers were still intact, untouched by the fire that consumed the ceremony grounds. Her dressing table bore remnants of anticipation: rosewater, a hair comb, ivory pins. But it was the diary tucked behind the mirror that interested me most. Half burnt at the corners, though, not by the wedding fire, and within it, a single entry, dated 2 nights before her death. I saw him again, watching from the cliff edge. He knows, God help me, he knows what I did to Mother. I closed the diary slowly. So, there was a secret older than the wedding. A ghost that walked not from smoke, but from family. Act 2 began with an interruption. A fisherman's son had found something at the base of the cliffs, a charred scrap of veil, but also a bridal shoe, white, sateen, untouched by fire, found more than 50 feet from the marquee. So, the bride, perhaps, was not in the tent when the fire started. Red herring, Poirot told himself. Or was it planted? The suspicion returned to Edgar Morton. But then Isabel Harrow fainted dramatically during a second questioning. Her handkerchief fell, and from it a small metal charm, scorched at one edge, matching the melted brooch Liliane was said to have worn. And yet, when I returned to Liliane's chamber, something had changed. The mirror, a fingerprint, black with soot, now streaked across its lower edge. Poirot does not believe in ghosts, but he believes in guilt, and guilt leaves traces, like footsteps in fresh snow. I summoned the 3 suspects that night: Edgar, Isabel, and Father Wilkes. I have deduced the truth, I announced, slowly pacing, and so I ask each of you one question only. To Edgar, why did you hide the letter from Tangier? He froze. How? The fire damaged many things, I said, but the metal lockbox in Liliane's drawer remained intact. And within it, your letter, written not to Liliane, but to her mother, a confession, a threat, a debt owed. To Isabel, why was your brooch in the ashes? It must have come loose, she said faintly. Ah, but you weren't wearing it that day. Liliane was. She had taken it from you after your quarrel. Did you follow her to the tent? Did you light the candle meant for the altar? And finally, to Father Wilkes, tell me, where were you between dusk and the fire's start? I was praying. In the garden or on the cliff? He opened his mouth, closed it. Poirot had seen enough. Now came the reveal. The fire, I said, was not meant to kill. It was meant to destroy evidence. A letter, a confession, perhaps even Liliane herself, but only after she had disappeared. I turned to Isabelle. "You lit the fire," I said. "You meant to burn her belongings. You thought she had exposed your affair with Edgar, yes?" Isabelle burst into tears. "She was going to ruin everything. My marriage, my name. She said she'd tell the entire village." Edgar recoiled. You and I never—" "Silence," I said. "It is too late for lies. The truth, it burns brighter." I looked at Father Wilkes. "You were the one she saw on the cliffs, weren't you? You knew the truth about her mother's death, because you helped cover it." He turned ashen. "She begged me to lie," he whispered. "Said her mother had fallen, but the bruises said otherwise. May God forgive me, I signed the certificate anyway. Finally, I faced Edgar Morton. And you, monsieur, did nothing. You loved her, perhaps, but not enough to protect her. And when she told you what she had done, you chose silence." The room collapsed into horror. I walked slowly to the window, looking out across the sea where the cliff met the sky. "You all failed her. Liliane was not mad. She was afraid, not of being exposed, but of being erased." The final twist came just before midnight. A telegram, sent by a hospital in Kent. A woman severely burned had been brought in, unidentified, mute, but carrying a scorched locket engraved with the initials L.B. Liliane Bellamy had escaped the fire. Barely. She had never screamed. Someone else had. A bridesmaid's dress was missing. Isabelle's, burnt nearly beyond recognition, in the tent. It had been her scream, her panic, when she saw the fire she had set take hold too fast, too wide. Liliane had fled, and no one, not even the man she loved, had followed. The bride burned alone, only in legend, but her vengeance would not. As I left Whitehaven by sea, I passed the old chapel bell. It tolled once. Then again, I thought of Liliane, her silence more powerful than any scream. "Ah," I murmured, "but justice, she has many voices, n'est-ce pas? And sometimes the quietest burns the longest." The wind carried the smoke out to sea, but the memory remained, and so did the truth. Chapter 2. A veil, left in ashes. Only the bridal veil remained, singed and soaked in something darker than tears. It lay in the center of the garden, like a ghost that refused to leave. A scorched veil, once ivory and fine as breath, now brittle with soot, and darkened at its edge by something that had long since dried, flaked, and sunk into the lace. Blood. Or something worse. The maid who found it fainted before she could even scream. When I arrived, the veil had already been enclosed in a glass case, as if to preserve not just the evidence, but the dread that clung to it. This was no mere remnant of a bridal costume. This was a message. It had not been lost. It had been placed, arranged carefully at the foot of the rose arch, precisely where the bride would have walked had she ever reached the altar. The ashes formed a soft crescent around it, as though the veil had tried to crawl back toward the fire that had taken her. I knelt before it slowly, inspecting the trim, the burned silk, the subtle scuffs on the hem, a smear of something oily near the comb's clasp. I did not speak. I simply watched, absorbed, until I felt Inspector Merrick shift beside me. "Grim, isn't it?" he said. "Grim," I murmured, "is a matter of degree. But theatrical, yes." He frowned. The veil was found early this morning. No one saw who placed it. Because it was placed while everyone was pretending to mourn, I replied. Or perhaps while they were busy constructing their own alibis. I turned and faced the estate again. The great Bellamy house, its ivy-choked walls and high windows like blind eyes staring into the void. The wedding had been meant to unite two old families, the Bellamys and the Mortons. But the union, it seemed, had been cursed before it had ever begun. And now, with the bride presumed dead in the fire, with only this veil left behind to speak for her, I suspected that the truth, like the lace, had caught fire and refused to turn to ash. Act 1 began with a revelation. The veil had not been scorched in the same fire that consumed the marquee. That blaze had occurred outside, wild and wind-fed. But this burn, this pattern of heat, the direction of the scorches, it came from above. A controlled flame, a different kind of death. I said nothing aloud, but in my mind, the thought repeated like a hymn. Someone had tried to fake the residue of grief. I requested to see the housekeeper. Mrs. Durrant, age 52, a widow, with hands like old parchment and a tongue like a dagger dipped in syrup. She informed me that Liliane's veil had gone missing 2 days before the wedding. She said the comb was loose, Mrs. Durrant muttered, claimed she'd taken it for repair. But that girl lied easily. She was afraid. Afraid? I said gently. Of what? The old woman looked around, lowered her voice. There's something wrong in this house, monsieur. Something not buried deep. Enough. Was it fear you saw in her eyes? I asked, watching her closely. Or guilt? Mrs. Durrant's silence was confirmation enough. Next, I sought out Henrietta March. She was the wedding photographer, an eccentric woman with gold-rimmed spectacles, an obsession with symmetry, and a camera that clicked like a guillotine. She had taken portraits the morning before the fire. When I examined the negatives, I found something curious. In every image of Liliane, her veil was missing. She said it made her look like a ghost, Henrietta told me. Said she wanted to feel real on her wedding day. But why then had the veil returned? And why like this? Act 2 began with a scream, again. But this time it came from the second floor of Bellamy House. The maid, Clara, had gone into Liliane's old room and found a charred scrap of parchment tucked beneath her pillow. It was a prayer, written in her own hand. But it wasn't about marriage. It was about forgiveness. And at the bottom, a single phrase repeated in ink, blurred by water. He knows. He watched me. The veil isn't enough. I gathered the household once again. Edgar Morton, the groom, pale and tight-lipped. Isabel Harrow, the friend who had lied about the brooch. Father Wilkes, who seemed to shrink further with each new revelation. And now, a new figure emerged. Maximilian Hartley, Liliane's cousin. Recently returned from Spain, heir to the remaining Bellamy lands, and looking, to my eye, just a little too composed for a man attending a cousin's memorial. Maximilian, I said slowly, did you see Liliane on the night before the fire? He smiled thinly. I did. We spoke, briefly. Did she tell you where she was going? She told me where she wished she could go. And where was that? Anywhere I wasn't. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, then bitterness or regret. I made note of it. Later, I searched his room. Beneath a false panel, in his wardrobe, I found a scorched handkerchief embroidered with the Bellamy crest, and beneath it, a letter, not from Liliane, but from her mother. The twist, you see, was this. Liliane's mother was not estranged. She was imprisoned in an asylum, deemed unstable after the mysterious death of her husband, Augustus Bellamy. But her letters, smuggled through a nurse, revealed a different truth. She had accused Maximilian of poisoning Augustus, of manipulating Liliane, of orchestrating the marriage to Edgar as a cover for reclaiming the Bellamy estate. And then came the second twist. Henrietta, the photographer, had developed one final roll of film. On it, a single blurry image, the garden at midnight, a figure in white, a veil over her face, walking not toward the altar, but away from the house, toward the cliff. Only one problem. By midnight, the veil had already been found burned. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Then I asked to speak to Isabel. She was in the chapel, kneeling, alone. "Tell me," I said quietly, "why did you keep the other veil?" She turned slowly. I don't know what you mean." "There were two," I said. "Liliane had a backup veil. The original was burned days ago. She told Clara it reminded her of a funeral shroud. You knew this. You burned the second veil and placed it in the garden to draw attention." "To what?" "To the wrong thing." Her hands trembled. "I only wanted to help. I thought, if they thought she was really gone." "Gone where?" Isabel said nothing. Act 3 began, not with a confrontation, but with a quiet knock at my door. It was Edgar. "She wrote to me," he said. "Liliane, 2 days before the wedding." He handed me the letter. "If anything happens, if the veil returns, know that it wasn't me who wore it. I cannot marry into death. Not again." And in the envelope, a train ticket. London. Dated the night of the fire. Used. So, Liliane had escaped. Or tried to. But the final twist came from an unexpected place. Henrietta's photo negatives, every single one, had been doctored. Subtly, a smudge here, a shifted shadow there. She had manipulated them. And why? Because she was Liliane's half-sister, the daughter of Augustus Bellamy's affair with a Spanish maid. Hidden, paid off, and now returned. She hadn't come to photograph a wedding. She'd come to expose a legacy. I gathered the suspects one last time. "You all believed you knew who Liliane was," I said. "But none of you saw her. Not truly. Not even when she fled." I faced Maximilian. "You feared she would take the estate. So you cornered her, threatened her, but you did not kill her." I faced Isabel. "You lied to protect Edgar, but also to punish her for seeing through you." And finally, to Henrietta. "You took her place." Gasps echoed through the chapel. "You donned the veil, walked into the garden, and let yourself be seen. You made the illusion so that she could vanish." Henrietta stared at me. She deserved her freedom. "And yet," I said softly, "you placed the veil. You left the blood. You played God." "She was your sister," I said, "but also your weapon." Henrietta did not deny it. The veil in ashes was not a symbol of grief. It was a decoy. And somewhere, far from Whitehaven by Sea, Liliane Bellamy was alive. But everyone else, those who loved her, hated her, used her, they would forever be bound to the ashes she left behind. As I stepped out into the sea air, I let the wind carry the last threads of smoke from the burned veil into the horizon. "Ah," I whispered, "it is most curious how those who vanish leave behind the loudest echoes." The veil was gone, but the scream it contained would haunt them all. Chapter 3. The Groom Who Didn't Cry. He wept at the altar, but not when she died. The church was silent, except for the slow, relentless ticking of the great-grandfather clock in the vestibule. Edgar Morton stood at the altar, his eyes glassy but unmoving, his hands trembling as he recited the vows to Liliane Bellamy. He wept then, deep, wrenching tears that stained his cheeks, betrayed a heart seemingly broken by love. Yet, the very same man had stood impassive hours later. When the news came, she had perished in the fire. Not a single tear, not a shudder, only a cold, stiff figure carved in shock and dread. The paradox haunted me from the moment I set foot in the village of Whitehaven by Sea. Why does a man weep for a moment and yet freeze when the world falls apart around him? Ah, but human nature, Hastings, it never changes. The mask of grief is often worn like a garment tailored for the eyes of others. My arrival was met with a storm that battered the cliffs and turned the sea to roiling charcoal. The old stone church stood firm, its stained glass shattered from the fire of suspicion and whispered lies that now filled every corner of the town. The altar was untouched by flame, yet it bore witness to a tragedy deeper than the loss of a bride. Edgar Morton, the groom, remained the focus of every whispered accusation, every sideways glance. My first encounter with Edgar was in the parlor of Bellamy House. He was a man in his early 30s, dark-haired and angular, dressed impeccably, but with a pallor that suggested sleepless nights and buried thoughts. His eyes avoided mine, flicking instead to the clock's pendulum, as if measuring time to some internal reckoning. "Monsieur Morton," I began, "you appeared inconsolable during the ceremony. Yet after the fire, your demeanor was reserved. Might I ask why this change?" He swallowed hard. "I loved her, Poirot, but that night I saw things she never told me." I nodded slowly, observing the slight tremor in his fingers. "Ah, but it is often what is not told that speaks the loudest. What did you see, monsieur?" He hesitated. "A shadow in the garden, a figure watching from the cliffs. Liliane was frightened. She begged me not to look, but I saw enough to know she was in danger." I filed away this confession and moved on to others in the household, each with their own tangled stories and secrets. Isabel Harrow, the maid of honor, was a woman whose polished smile barely concealed a heart churning with jealousy and resentment. Her life had been entwined with Liliane's since childhood, yet the tenderness between them was strained. Edgar, she confided during our talk, was distant, not a man she could truly trust. "Why such suspicion, mademoiselle?" she faltered. "Because he never cried when she died." "Not really. There was Father Wilkes, the chaplain, whose trembling hands and haunted eyes suggested a man burdened with more than holy duties. "There are sins we carry quietly," he muttered when I questioned him, "sins of omission and betrayal. Perhaps Edgar is such a man." And then there was Clara, the housemaid, whose sudden silence during questioning said more than any words could. When I caught her stealing a glance at Edgar, a secret seemed to flutter behind her eyes. Act 1 unfolded in the burning aftermath of the fire, but also in the flickering candlelight of whispered confessions. Edgar's facade cracked slowly as I pressed him on his movements the night Liliane died. "I went to find her," he insisted, "but when I reached the garden, she was gone. Only the smoke and ashes remained. Yet the evidence was confounding. The bloodstains in the study did not match Edgar's, The footprints near the cliff were too large for his shoes. And the ash-streaked veil, did it burn too evenly to be accidental? Act 2 deepened the labyrinth of suspicion. A letter, hidden in Liliane's desk, written in a trembling hand, confessed a secret love, one not Edgar's. The ink had run with tears, or perhaps rain, but the words were clear. She had planned to escape, to flee the village and the man she no longer trusted. Then came the red herring. Isabel confessed, under duress, to setting a small fire in the kitchen to distract from an argument with Liliane. But it was unrelated to the main blaze. She was guilty of passion, not murder. Her tears flowed, freely now, but did not touch the truth. Father Wilkes's alibi dissolved under scrutiny. He had been near the cliffs when the fire began. Witnesses saw him speaking in hushed tones with a stranger. But who was this person? And what did their conversation conceal? Clara's silence broke when confronted with the truth. She revealed a secret affair with Edgar, a desperate attempt to secure a future amidst chaos. But her jealousy had turned bitter when Edgar returned his attentions to Liliane. Motive, yes, but not means. In Act 3, under the storm's rage and the ticking clock, I gathered the household in the great hall, shadows dancing on their faces like ghosts. The final puzzle pieces slid into place. Edgar Morton, I declared, you are a man torn between duty and desire. You loved Liliane in one moment and feared her the next. But your tears at the altar were not for her. They were for the life you had lost before the fire even began. He swallowed hard, eyes darting. What do you mean? You hid from us the truth that you were already married. A secret wife, alive and well, in London. Liliane discovered this before the wedding. She confronted you, threatened to expose you, and you silenced her. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara's affair, I continued, was your shield. Isabel's jealousy, your red herring. Father Wilkes's presence on the cliffs was an innocent coincidence. I paused, letting the weight settle. The fire was no accident. It was your calculated act of desperation. Edgar's knees buckled. I loved her. I never meant... But you did, I said softly, and love, when twisted by fear, can burn brighter than any flame. The final twist struck like a cold blade. A letter, found clutched in Liliane's hand after the fire, revealed she had forgiven Edgar. She planned to run away with him, not to expose, but to start anew. But another hand had intervened. A hand filled with rage, betrayal, and a hunger for inheritance. Maximilian Hartley, Liliane's cousin, stepped forward, pale and trembling. I couldn't let her ruin everything, he confessed. The Bellamy legacy is mine. The room erupted, but the darkest truth lay hidden still. The blood on the veil, Edgar's second wife's. She had come to Whitehaven, seeking to end the nightmare, but in her rage she had set the fatal fire. Edgar did not cry for Liliane, because his grief was buried beneath layers of lies, guilt, and broken vows. As the storm outside subsided, I stood by the window, gazing at the flickering candlelight and the slow return of dawn. Ah, but human nature, Hastings, I murmured to myself. It never changes. It weeps, it lies, it burns, and yet it always reveals its true face in the end. The groom who did not cry had become the man who could no longer hide behind tears. The fire had screamed his name, and justice, at last, was delivered. Chapter 4. The Candle That Wasn't Lit. One unlit candle on the altar, one secret left burning. The candle stood untouched, its wick blackened but never ignited, an anomaly amid the dozen others flickering with trembling flames. It sat upon the altar like a sentinel, silent, waiting, mocking. No one dared speak of it aloud, but all felt its presence, a secret stubbornly burning in the cold shadow of that night's tragedy. The very sight of it sent chills through the small congregation, gathered in the village chapel, now thick with whispers and suspicion. I arrived as twilight bled into night, the sea wind carrying salt and old secrets through the cracked windows. The storm outside raged softly, and within, the dim candlelight danced on polished wood, casting long, shifting shadows across the ancient stone floor. The great clock ticked relentlessly, a measured heartbeat in a room where time seemed fractured. "Poirot," said Inspector Merrick, his voice low, "this candle was meant to be lit during the vows. Instead, it remains as a witness, silent, yet accusing." I approached, crouching to inspect. The candle's wick was charred, blackened, as if someone had attempted to light it and stopped mid-flame. I traced a fingertip along the surface, noting the uneven wax pool beneath, hardened but cracked. Someone had hesitated. Ah, human nature, Hastings. It never changes. It conceals with shadows and half-truths. The chapel was the heart of Bellamy House, a place where vows were sworn and secrets buried deeper than the crypt beneath. Tonight, that unlit candle was a beacon of lies. My investigation began with those closest to the bride and groom. Edgar Morton, the groom, was pallid and restless, pacing near the back pew. His usually steady hands trembled as he fingered a silver watch chain. When I approached, he forced a smile. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, voice strained, "the candle. It should have been lit. Liliane insisted on it." "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. "It was a family tradition, a symbol, to light the way, to bind the union." I observed his eyes carefully, too steady, too rehearsed. Next, I turned to Isabel Harrow, the maid of honor, seated rigidly by the organ. Her smile was tight, her gaze darting like a cornered fox. "It was my duty to light the candles," she said quickly. I was distracted." "A distraction can be fatal," I murmured. "Tell me, mademoiselle, what distracted you?" Her lips quivered, but she remained silent. Father Wilkes, the chaplain, sat near the altar, his face a mask of piety and dread. "The candle," he whispered, "was meant to symbolize faith, but sometimes faith falters. Did you see who was supposed to light it?" I pressed. He avoided my gaze. I was attending to other matters. And so the shadows deepened. The candle's failure to burn was no accident. It was deliberate. Act 1 unfolded amidst the flicker of suspicion and the quiet shuffle of feet on ancient stone. The unlit candle was a symbol and a clue. During my examination of the chapel, after the others had left, I noticed something others had overlooked. A faint smear on the altar cloth, darker than the wax stains. Something oily, viscous. I collected it carefully. A trace of something foreign. Later, in the laboratory, the analysis confirmed my suspicion. The candle had been deliberately tampered with, coated in a thin film of a substance designed to prevent ignition. But by whom? And why? Act 2 deepened with interrogations, beneath the watchful gaze of storm clouds gathering over the sea cliffs. Edgar admitted he had been alone in the chapel minutes before the ceremony began. I was rehearsing my vows, he claimed, but the candle was already unlit. Isabel's story wavered. She confessed to an argument with Liliane earlier that day over something she refused to name. It was trivial, she insisted, but she was upset. Father Wilkes remained vague, his alibi fractured by contradictions. I was in the vestry, he said, but others say they saw me outside. The investigation soon uncovered a new player, Clara, the maid, who had quietly left the village days before the fire. Her sudden disappearance was suspicious, especially after letters surfaced hinting at her knowledge of the chapel's secrets. The red herring emerged when a local witness claimed to have seen a stranger near the chapel at dusk. A tall man, cloaked, moving with purpose, but his identity remained elusive, and the trail soon grew cold. Yet, a small detail caught my eye: the arrangement of the candles on the altar. One was placed oddly off-center, a subtle but deliberate misplacement. A message, perhaps? Act 3 was a gathering of shadows and revelations. I called the household together in the dim light of the chapel, the unlit candle burning still in darkness. My friends, I began, the candle that was not lit is a symbol of a secret left burning, a truth someone sought to extinguish, but failed. I turned to Edgar. Monsieur Morton, you spoke of tradition. Yet, you alone had the opportunity and motive to prevent the lighting. Why? He swallowed. I was afraid of what the light would reveal. To what do you refer? My past. The secret I kept from Liliane. Isabel's eyes flickered with anger. His past was my torment as well. And you, Father Wilkes, I asked, what did you hope to hide in the shadows? Each confession peeled back layers of deceit. The devastating final twist came when Clara was found hiding in a nearby fisherman's cottage, clutching a matchbox stained with wax. She tried to light the candle, I told the group, but not to unite. It was a signal, a warning. She confessed a secret liaison with Liliane and a plan to flee together. The candle was meant to be lit to signal a boat waiting offshore. The fire that followed, the veil in ashes, the groom who did not cry, all were part of a darker tale of betrayal and desperation. As the storm abated and dawn crept over the cliffs, I reflected on the quiet chapel, its unlit candle still casting long shadows. Ah, but human nature, Hastings, I whispered to the empty room. It never changes. We light fires to reveal, and yet so often we leave one candle unlit to hide the darkest truth. The secret remained burning, unseen, unacknowledged, but never extinguished. Marching Chapter 5. The stranger at the rehearsal. No one invited him. No one remembers his face. The storm was gathering, thunder rolling low over the cliffs, as if the earth itself groaned under a weight too terrible to bear. Inside Bellamy House, the air hung thick with the scent of candle wax and nervous anticipation. The wedding rehearsal was underway, or so it should have been. But a chill had settled, not from the weather, but from a presence that no one dared name. No one invited him, whispered Isabel Harrow, voice trembling. And yet, there he was. No one remembers his face, added Clara, the maid, eyes wide and haunted. But we all saw him. That was where I found myself, standing in the grand hallway beneath the flickering sconces, the portraits of stern ancestors seeming to watch with silent judgment. The echo of footsteps that were not meant to be, the quick, nervous glances between those present, told a story more fractured than the stained glass windows, shattered years ago in a long-forgotten tempest. I thought to myself, ah, but human nature, Hastings, it never changes. It hides behind polite smiles and rehearsed alibis, but it is revealed in the smallest cracks, in forgotten faces, uninvited shadows. The rehearsal had been a simple affair, family and close friends gathering to walk the route to the chapel, to speak the vows aloud, to smooth the edges of what should have been a joyous day. But something had ruptured that night, something unseen but deeply felt. I began my inquiry with Edgar Morton, the groom, a man whose composure was as brittle as the crystal glasses trembling in his hands. "Monsieur Morton," I said, "tell me about this stranger. Why was he there?" Edgar's jaw tightened. I did not see him. No one told me." "But you were in the house." "Yes, in the library. Alone?" His eyes flickered to the window as lightning flashed. "No, Isabel was there." Isabel, of course, was quick to deny any knowledge. "I saw no stranger," she said sharply. "You must be mistaken." Yet, in the shadows, Clara's silence spoke volumes. She shivered as she recounted the strange cold that swept the hallway, the unaccounted footsteps, the fleeting shape glimpsed from the corner of an eye. As I moved through the rooms, inspecting each with the care of a man accustomed to finding truth in dust and shadow, my gaze fell upon the dining room, a spilled glass of wine, its crimson stain drying on the polished oak, seemed out of place amid the careful order. Nearby, a scrap of paper, a torn invitation to an event months past, was carelessly dropped, a careless detail or a deliberate clue. Then came the first plot twist. The village's gossiping librarian, Mrs. Fenton, provided a curious piece of information. A man matching the stranger's vague description had been seen lurking near the cliffs days before the fire. A drifter, perhaps, or a spy. No one knew. I followed this lead, only to discover it was a red herring. The man was an itinerant painter, known for his solitary walks and eccentric habits, utterly unconnected to the Bellamy tragedy. The second act unraveled further threads of suspicion. Edgar's relationship with Liliane was strained, shadowed by secrets best left unspoken. Isabel's jealousy simmered beneath her composed exterior, and Father Wilkes, once considered a figure of calm, was revealed to have had bitter disagreements with the bride. Candlelight flickered, and the clock ticked with cold precision. I questioned each again, peeling away their masks. Lies and half-truths emerged like ghosts from the walls. The final act gathered all under the dim glow of the chapel, the unlit candle still a silent witness. The stranger's identity came to light. Not a drifter, but someone far closer than anyone suspected. Maximilian Hartley, Liliane's cousin, had disguised himself to attend the rehearsal unnoticed. His motive? To ensure the wedding proceeded without interference, and to silence any who threatened the Bellamy legacy. But the true revelation was more profound. Isabel, consumed by jealousy, had colluded with Maximilian, weaving a web of deceit that led to the fire. Her role was not just that of an observer, but an accomplice, driven by desperation and betrayal. The devastating final twist revealed that Edgar, despite appearances, had been protecting a secret that would have shattered the family. His clandestine meeting with Liliane's estranged mother, seeking to uncover the truth behind Augustus Bellamy's death. As the storm broke and dawn painted the sky with blood-red hues, I stood alone in the silent chapel, the weight of secrets pressing like a suffocating shroud. "Ah, but human nature, Hastings," I murmured to the empty air. "It hides in faces forgotten, in candles unlit, and in strangers no one remembers, but who burn the brightest in the end. No invitation can bar the truth, and no forgotten face can escape justice." Chapter 6. The Dress That Shouldn't Exist. It matches the bride's, but she never wore it. The dress hung in the dim light of the guest room, a ghostly replica of the bridal gown, pure white delicate lace cascading in waves, every pearl and sequin intact, untouched by the inferno that had claimed the real wedding. Yet it carried a silence that screamed louder than any flames. The fabric shimmered under the flickering candlelight, as if daring anyone who dared enter to question its existence. How could such a dress be here, when the bride never wore it? The room smelled faintly of lavender and forgotten promises, the heavy curtains swaying with the restless wind from the sea. A clock somewhere in the house ticked relentlessly, each second a measured beat in the dance of lies and revelation. I approached, my fingers brushing the delicate sleeve, tracing the seam where the satin had been stitched with care and deceit. Ah, but human nature, Hastings, it never changes. We cling to illusions. We wear masks stitched from fear and desire. And sometimes a dress is not just a dress, but a secret waiting to be unwrapped. My arrival was greeted by a tight knot of tension among the household. Edgar Morton paced near the hearth, restless and pale. Isabel Harrow stood by the window, her eyes darting like a trapped bird. Father Wilkes, the chaplain, hovered silently in the shadows, a man burdened by unseen sins. Each had their own story, their own mask. The discovery of the second dress had thrown the household into chaos. Why was it here, untouched? Who had hidden it away, and why? The bridal gown was the most personal symbol of the day, the identity the bride wore to the altar, the armor she cloaked herself in. To find another, identical yet unworn, was to find a riddle wrapped in silk. I began with Edgar. His voice was brittle as he explained, "Liliane, she never trusted the dress. Said it felt like a costume, a trap." "And this dress?" I asked. "Did she ever see it?" He shook his head. "No, it was made as a backup, but she forbade anyone to bring it out." Isabel's face twisted with anger and sorrow. She was afraid, yes, afraid of the wedding, of what it meant. She confided in me once, whispered that the dress was not hers, that it belonged to someone else. "Who?" I pressed. Isabel hesitated. She wouldn't say. Father Wilkes, in his measured tone, offered, "A dress can carry history, monsieur. Perhaps this one carried a curse." The air grew heavier as I examined the gown. There was something in the fabric's weave, a faint scent of musk, and something darker, a trace of betrayal sewn into its threads. I noticed faint stains near the hem, not blood, but a residue of wine, or perhaps ink. My mind returned to the night before the fire, the rehearsal disrupted by strange shadows and half-remembered faces. Who had moved this dress? Who had planned its presence here? Act 1 unfolded amidst this quiet storm of suspicion and fear. The dress became a symbol of duality, the bride she wished to be, and the bride she was forced to become. A local seamstress, Mrs. Layton, revealed that the dress was commissioned by an anonymous client months before Liliane returned to England. She insisted it was not for Liliane, but for someone else, someone who shared her measurements exactly. This revelation sent ripples through the investigation. Who could this other bride be? Act 2 deepened the intrigue. A letter surfaced, hidden in the lining of the dress, its ink faded but legible. It was addressed to Liliane, warning her to beware of those closest to her. The writer spoke of secrets, of debts owed in silence and blood. I summoned the household again. Each face was a mask, trembling, on the verge of shattering. Edgar admitted to a secret meeting with Liliane's mother, recently released from an asylum, whose presence threatened to upend the fragile peace. Isabel confessed to a bitter rivalry not just with Liliane, but with another woman, a ghost from the past, whose shadow still haunted Bellamy House. Father Wilkes, pressured by my questioning, revealed he had hidden letters between Liliane and an unknown correspondent, letters that hinted at a plan to flee, to abandon the wedding, and perhaps the family legacy. But the greatest red herring came when a mysterious figure was spotted near the estate, an old woman matching the description of the missing asylum patient. She vanished before she could be questioned, leaving only whispers behind. The clock ticked on. Act 3 gathered all into the great hall, the atmosphere thick with accusation and dread. I began with the dress itself. "This gown," I said, "is not merely fabric. It is a message, a mirror reflecting not one bride, but two, one who was promised a future and one who was discarded." I faced Edgar. "You sought to protect your inheritance, yes? To ensure Liliane's silence." He looked away. "To Isabel," I said, "your jealousy was not merely of Liliane, but of the other woman, the one the dress was made for. Your fear twisted into betrayal." Her hands clenched. "And Father Wilkes," I continued, "you kept secrets to shield sins long buried beneath your prayers." The final twist unfolded with the discovery of a hidden chamber behind the chapel's altar, a room containing the dress Liliane was supposed to wear. It belonged to her twin sister, Clara, who had been hidden away after birth due to scandal. Clara had returned that night, wearing the identical dress, intent on stopping the wedding, on reclaiming what was stolen. In the struggle, the fire broke out. The dress that shouldn't exist was more than a garment. It was the mark of a shattered family, fractured identities, and a tragic collision of love and vengeance. As dawn broke over the cliffs, I stood alone in the chamber, the faint scent of lace and smoke lingering. "Ah, but human nature, Hastings," I whispered. "It never changes. We weave our own disguises, drape ourselves in borrowed identities, and yet the truth always threads its way through the fabric of our lies." The dress hung silent once more, but its story burned on, a flame no fire could consume. Chapter 7. The Whisper. Behind the Mirror. A bridesmaid hears it first. Then she disappears. The whisper came in the dead of night, soft, almost inaudible, a breath against the cracked glass of the dressing-room mirror. "Do you see her?" it seemed to ask, a voice barely more than a shadow. Isabel Harrow froze, her pale hand trembling as she pressed against the cool surface. No one else had heard it, but for her, the voice lingered, a sinister invitation, curling like smoke in the air. When morning came, she was gone, vanished without a trace. Her absence was the first thread that began to unravel the carefully woven tapestry of lies surrounding the Bellamy tragedy. I arrived at the estate as the dawn broke, the storm clouds still churning over the cliffs, and the sea moaning a dark lament. The dressing room was dim, lit only by the faint flicker of a dying candle. The mirror, an ornate relic from a bygone era, dominated the space, its surface streaked with the fingerprints of frantic hands. I traced the edge with my fingertip, noting a faint smear, something that did not belong, a residue of powder, a touch of lipstick, not belonging to any of the women who had gathered. Ah, but human nature, Hastings. It never changes. It whispers secrets only those willing to listen can hear, and it hides horrors behind the fairest reflections. Isabel's disappearance was more than a mere flight. It was a message. I first spoke with Edgar Morton, the groom, whose pallid face betrayed exhaustion and a grief that had curdled into suspicion. Isabel was unsettled, he confessed, She spoke of voices, of seeing shadows that moved without bodies. "But you, monsieur," I asked, "did you hear these whispers?" He looked away. "No, I did not." Then there was Clara, the maid, whose loyalty was split like fractured glass between the bride and the household's secrets. Isabel was frightened, she admitted quietly. She was alone when she heard it. I tried to calm her, but her voice faltered. Father Wilkes, too, was a man haunted by his own shadows. "The mirror is old," he said. "Some say it holds the spirits of the past." Perhaps Isabel glimpsed something she was not meant to see. I studied each with the eye of a man who knows that the truth is often hidden in the spaces between words, in the glances not returned. Act 1 unfolded in the cold, candlelit rooms where fear whispered beneath the polished veneer of civility. The mirror became a symbol of reflection and distortion, of truth fractured by perception. A careful search revealed Isabel's personal effects scattered in the garden, the gloves she had worn, a diary open to a page stained with tears. Her last entry spoke cryptically of the bride behind the glass and a warning to beware those who smile in the light but kill in the dark. Act 2 led me deeper into the labyrinth of suspicion. A series of secret correspondences emerged, letters between Isabel and an unknown figure discussing blackmail and betrayals. The handwriting was disguised, but the passion and fear behind the words were unmistakable. The red herring came when an old servant claimed to have seen a man lurking near the chapel on the night of Isabel's disappearance. The description was vague, a shadow among shadows, but it threw suspicion on Maximilian Hartley, Liliane's cousin, who denied all involvement with cold precision. In the flickering light of the chapel, I observed subtle details, the creak of a floorboard out of place, the faint scent of jasmine where no flowers grew. Each clue was a whisper, a secret calling to be heard. Act 3 gathered the remaining household in the great hall, the mirror draped with a black cloth, but still heavy with unseen presence. I began. Isabel Harrow did not disappear because she fled. She vanished because she uncovered a truth some wished buried. I faced Edgar. "You feared exposure, monsieur, did you not? Isabel knew of your secret meetings, of promises broken and lies told." To Clara, I said, "Your silence was bought with fear, but fear often demands a price." And to Father Wilkes, "Your sermons spoke of forgiveness, yet you hid sins darker than confessionals." The devastating final twist came with the revelation that the mirror itself was a relic of vengeance. Behind its frame was a hidden compartment containing a folded letter, Liliane's final testament, revealing the true architect of the fire and the orchestrator of the betrayals. Isabel had been silenced not by fear, but by knowledge. The whisper behind the mirror was her last warning. As the storm outside finally broke, rain washing away the sins of the past, I stood before the mirror once more, reflecting on the fragile nature of truth. "Ah, but human nature, Hastings," I whispered. "It is a mirror cracked by lies, but still, it reflects the soul. And sometimes the quietest whisper carries the heaviest burden." The bridesmaid, who heard the whisper, vanished, but her voice, like the truth, echoed endlessly in the shadows she left behind. Chapter 8. Her last dance was with a shadow. Witnesses saw her alone, but her footprints weren't. The moonlight sliced through the mist like a silver blade, casting long, ghostly shadows across the ballroom floor. Liliane Bellamy twirled alone, her white gown swirling with an ethereal grace that seemed almost otherworldly. The witnesses, gathered at the edges, watched in silent awe or silent fear. Yet when dawn broke and the garden was scoured, only one set of footprints marked the dew-soaked grass. Hers, but someone had danced with her, unseen, unmarked. A shadow left no trace. From the moment I stepped into Bellamy House, that haunting contradiction echoed in my mind. How could a dance be shared and yet remain invisible? How could the bride be alone, yet not alone? Ah, but human nature, Hastings, it never changes. It is a dance of masks and secrets, steps rehearsed in silence and deception. The ballroom was a cathedral of flickering candlelight and muted gas lamps, the heavy curtains fluttering in the chill sea breeze. The air was thick with the scent of roses and old wood. I studied the polished floor, noting faint scuff marks, slight enough to dismiss, yet meaningful to a careful observer. The mirrors lining the walls held their own reflections of the night's tragedy, broken fragments of truth. I began with Edgar Morton, standing near the fireplace, his fingers nervously twisting the cuff of his sleeve. "Monsieur Morton," I said, "tell me about that night, the dance, the shadows." His eyes darkened. She was radiant but distant, like she was speaking to someone no one else could see. "Did you see this shadow?" "No." "But others did?" He nodded reluctantly. "Some guests claimed to see her dancing with a figure, but no one could say who. No one heard a voice." Isabel Harrow, ever poised, had her own story. "I was near the garden door," she explained, "and I saw Liliane step outside. But there was no one with her. Yet when I looked down, I saw footprints beside hers. Fresh, larger. I observed her carefully, the way she avoided my gaze, the quick flicker of her eyes. Suspicion, like a delicate thread, wove itself between us. Father Wilkes, the chaplain, was grave. It was a vision, perhaps, a ghost from the past, or a future yet to come. His words were cloaked in faith, but his hands betrayed his doubt. Act 1 unfolded, amid the ballroom's faded grandeur and the garden's moonlit mystery. The dance was more than a memory. It was a puzzle, a riddle, entwined with fear. Close examination of the garden revealed disturbances, broken twigs, a crushed flower bed. Yet the footprints betrayed no partner, only Liliane's. In the garden shed, I found a discarded glove, male, worn, faintly scented with tobacco and cedar wood. A clue left behind, or a trap set to mislead. Act 2 deepened the labyrinth. A series of letters uncovered between Liliane and an anonymous correspondent spoke of meetings under cover of darkness, whispered secrets, and promises made and broken. The handwriting was elegant but disguised, the ink smeared as if by trembling hands. Suspicions shifted. Edgar's alibi was fragile. He admitted to leaving the ballroom briefly that night. Isabel's demeanor grew colder, her past laced with jealousy and hidden debts. Father Wilkes's sermons took on a sharper edge, his eyes flickering with unspoken regrets. A red herring appeared, when a local fisherman claimed to have seen a shadowy figure fleeing the estate near midnight. The description was vague, broad-shouldered, cloaked, but not conclusive. I found myself drawn repeatedly to the ballroom mirror. Its surface was faintly cracked, the fractures forming an intricate web like the tangled lies of the household. Act 3 brought all into the great hall, shadows and light weaving a tapestry of accusation. I began, Liliane's last dance was with a shadow, an unseen partner who left no footprints. Yet this shadow was not supernatural. It was very real. I faced Edgar. Monsieur Morton, you feared losing everything. The estate, the legacy. You sought to keep her silent. To Isabel, your envy ran deep, deeper than friendship. You coveted what was not yours. And to Father Wilkes, your faith could not absolve your sins. The devastating final twist came as I revealed the truth behind the footprints. The second set, larger, fresher, was made not by a person, but by a pair of shoes carefully placed, a deliberate illusion. The shadow that danced with Liliane was none other than Clara Bellamy, her twin sister, hidden from the world and now returned to reclaim what was hers. The dance was a confrontation, a desperate plea, and a final act before tragedy. Clara's footprints were covered, her presence erased by design. As the storm outside finally broke and rain washed the garden clean, I stood alone by the ballroom window, the last echoes of the dance fading into the night. "Ah, but human nature, Hastings," I whispered. "It is a dance of light and shadow, of truth and illusion. And sometimes the steps we do not see tell the most haunting stories." Liliane's last dance was with a shadow, but the truth, like footprints in wet earth, remains. Chapter 9. The ring left in the coffin. She never wore it, but someone buried it with her. The coffin lay open beneath the flickering glow of the chapel's gas lamps, its polished wood a silent witness to the final mystery. Resting upon the satin pillow was a ring, delicate, gleaming, bearing an engraving no one had seen before. A ring Liliane Bellamy had never worn, yet someone had buried it with her, as though to tell a secret no living soul dared speak. The moment I glimpsed that ring, I felt the cold breath of deception wrapped tighter around the Bellamy tragedy. The congregation was hushed, the candlelight dancing on faces etched with grief and suspicion. The storm outside howled like a beast at the gates, its fury reflected in the tension that thrummed through the ancient stones. I stepped closer, observing the ring's intricate design, a serpent devouring its own tail, an Ouroboros, symbol of eternal return and hidden cycles. What eternal lie had been buried here? Ah, but human nature, Hastings, it never changes. It hides in shadows, in symbols, in the smallest details overlooked by the hurried eye. I began with Edgar Morton, the groom, his jaw clenched, his eyes betraying a storm beneath the calm. "Monsieur Morton," I said softly, "why was this ring placed with the bride, when she never wore it?" His gaze faltered. "I do not know. It was not hers." "Then whose?" Isabel Harrow, watching from the side, breathed sharply. "It belonged to Liliane's mother, a woman shrouded in darkness and madness." Father Wilkes nodded slowly. "A cursed legacy, Monsieur Poirot. Some say the ring carries the sins of generations, yet each of these explanations seem to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Act 1 unfolded in the silent chamber of mourning, where grief mingled with suspicion. The ring was more than a jewel. It was a key. A search of Bellamy House uncovered a hidden drawer in Liliane's desk containing letters in a trembling hand. They spoke of a pact, one forged in desperation between Liliane and a shadowy figure demanding the ring as collateral. Act 2 tangled further with revelations. Edgar confessed to a secret meeting with a mysterious woman in London who claimed to hold Liliane's fate in her hands. Isabel admitted to burning a letter, fearful of its contents. Father Wilkes revealed he had counseled Liliane on a sin he dared not name. The red herring emerged when a stranger's locket was found near the cliffs, its owner unknown, a false lead stirring old fears. As the storm raged and the clocks ticked with unforgiving rhythm, I questioned each suspect anew, peeling away layers of deceit. The ring's engraving hinted at a secret society, an ancient vendetta masked by family honor. Act 3 gathered the household in the chapel's shadowed nave. The ring was placed under a single beam of light. "Who buried this with Liliane?" I demanded. Edgar faltered, then confessed. "I feared it would destroy us all," Isabel sobbed. "I only wanted to protect her." Father Wilkes lowered his gaze. "Some sins cannot be confessed." The final twist came when I revealed the ring's true owner, not the bride, nor her mother, but a third woman, long erased from the family's memory. Liliane's twin sister, Clara. Hidden at birth, her existence erased to preserve a fragile legacy. Clara had demanded the ring as proof of her claim. The one buried with Liliane was a counterfeit, a cruel deception. As dawn crept over the storm-battered cliffs, I stood alone, the weight of truth heavy in the silence. "Ah, but human nature, Hastings," I murmured. "It is a cycle, unbroken, a ring of secrets and betrayals. And sometimes the jewel that binds us is the very one that shatters." The ring left in the coffin was not merely a token, it was the key to a family's ruin, and the echo of a love twisted by darkness. Chapter 10. The bridesmaid who lied in prayer. She claimed innocence, until Poirot asked about the hymn. The church organ groaned beneath the weight of a mournful hymn, its notes trembling like a frightened bird caught in a storm. The flicker of candlelight danced against stained glass windows, casting fractured colors upon the marble altar. In the midst of this fragile serenity stood Miss Eleanor Vane, hands clasped tightly as if clinging to faith itself. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a flicker of something darker, a shadow too swift to name. "I was praying," she whispered when Poirot approached, voice brittle like cracked porcelain. "I swear I had no part in it." Yet the slightest tremble in her fingers betrayed a secret she fought desperately to keep. And when Poirot quietly inquired about the hymn she sang during the vigil, Eleanor faltered, revealing a fissure no prayer could mend. It began 3 nights earlier at the sprawling estate of the recently widowed Lord Alistair Crowley, where preparations for his daughter's wedding were underway. The bride-to-be, Lady Clarissa Marchmont, was the jewel of London society, radiant, poised, beloved by many, envied by most. Eleanor Vane, her closest childhood friend and chosen bridesmaid, was expected to stand faithfully at her side. Yet beneath the surface, a tempest brewed. On the eve of the wedding, a scream shattered the quiet of the drawing room, a sound so raw and anguished it silenced every conversation, froze every heartbeat. Lady Clarissa was found, collapsed by the grand fireplace, her face pale as ash, clutching a blood-stained note. By morning, she was dead, poisoned, her final moments spent clutching a hymn book whose pages were cruelly scorched. Poirot arrived as the storm outside lashed against the ancient stone walls of Crowley Manor, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. The flickering gas lamps cast elongated shadows through the great hall, where family and friends gathered, faces etched with shock and suspicion. Lord Crowley, a gaunt man whose grief simmered beneath a mask of stoicism, welcomed Poirot with a weary nod. "She was to be married tomorrow," he said, voice hoarse. "Now all is lost." But loss, Poirot knew, often masked darker truths. The initial investigation yielded 3 figures of interest, each carrying their own burden of secrets and motives as tangled as the ivy clutching the manor walls. Eleanor Vane, the bridesmaid, whose steadfast loyalty was now in question. Sir Geoffrey Langley, a charming diplomat whose unspoken affection for Clarissa was whispered in salons but denied in public. And Dr. Harold Fenwick, the family physician, whose recent disputes with the deceased over her wedding arrangements hinted at deeper resentments. Poirot's gaze lingered on Eleanor first. Her delicate hands trembled as she recited alibis with rehearsed precision. Yet beneath the veneer of composure, subtle tells betrayed her unease, a flicker in her eyes when questioned about the evening's events, a brief hesitation before answering about the hymn she sang at the vigil. Ah, but human nature, Hastings, Poirot mused silently. It never changes. The smallest detail, often overlooked, reveals the greatest deception. The hymn itself became a pivotal clue. Eleanor had claimed to sing "Abide with Me," a solemn and familiar tune to all present. Yet Poirot, with his impeccable memory for melody, knew the version she hummed was different, an obscure variation, seldom heard outside the most devout circles. When pressed, Eleanor's voice faltered, the confident cadence breaking into a fragile whisper. This discrepancy unsettled Poirot, raising questions about her true presence and intentions during that fateful night. Sir Geoffrey Langley, meanwhile, presented a polished facade, but Poirot's keen eye noticed the restless twitch of his left hand and the way his gaze darted whenever Eleanor was mentioned. In their private encounter, Langley spoke with guarded charm, deflecting Poirot's probing questions with a practiced ease. Yet a closer examination of his correspondence revealed clandestine letters to a mysterious recipient, hinting at debts owed and favors demanded. Was his affection for Clarissa genuine, or a mask to cover darker ambitions? Dr. Fenwick's alibi was less convincing. Found pacing near the wine cellar on the night of the poisoning, his explanations were riddled with inconsistencies. Poirot observed the faint smell of almonds clinging to his breath, the subtle scent of cyanide. When confronted, Fenwick denied involvement, claiming recent contact with chemical agents in his medical practice. But the physician's trembling hands and a hastily hidden vial beneath his coat told a story of concealment. As the investigation deepened, Poirot orchestrated subtle confrontations and whispered interrogations, the tension tightening like a noose around the suspects' throats. He examined the shattered hymn book, noting the scorch marks forming a pattern around a single torn page, a page missing the very verse Eleanor claimed to have sung. His suspicions grew that the hymnal had been manipulated to mislead, and that Eleanor's prayers were a facade. Then came the first twist, a revelation that sent ripples through the assembled guests. A letter surfaced, unsigned but unmistakably penned by Lady Clarissa, accusing Eleanor of betrayal and deceit. It spoke of a secret liaison between Eleanor and Sir Geoffrey, a forbidden romance masked beneath friendship. The letter suggested that Clarissa had planned to call off the wedding, a move that would have devastated the family and destroyed Eleanor's ambitions. But the letter was dated after Clarissa's death, an impossibility unless forged. Poirot's investigation turned toward forgery and manipulation. Who had written the letter to frame Eleanor, and what was the purpose? His suspicions momentarily veered toward Dr. Fenwick, whose medical expertise could easily fabricate such a document, yet no direct evidence linked him to the act, leaving the detective wary of a red herring designed to divert attention. In a pivotal scene, Poirot gathered the suspects in the drawing room, the flickering candlelight casting long, ominous shadows. His voice was calm, but resolute as he laid bare the strands of his deductions. He challenged Eleanor on the hymn discrepancy, her denial wavering under the weight of truth. He confronted Sir Geoffrey about the secret letters, exposing their financial entanglements and mutual deceit. And he pressed Dr. Fenwick on his concealed vial and inconsistent alibi, forcing a confession of guilt, but not for murder. The final devastating twist came when Poirot revealed the true orchestrator of the tragedy, Lady Clarissa herself. Through a secret journal discovered hidden behind a loose brick in her chamber, Poirot uncovered that Clarissa had been poisoning herself slowly in an act of desperate control, seeking to manipulate the outcome of the wedding and the lives entwined with hers. The blood-stained note she clutched was not a call for help, but a final act of vengeance, intended to ruin those she felt had betrayed her trust. This revelation shattered the room. Eleanor wept, absolved yet broken. Sir Geoffrey's charm crumbled into bitter regret. Dr. Fenwick collapsed into weary resignation, and Poirot, standing amidst the ruins of love and lies, mused softly, "The greatest mysteries are not in what is hidden, but in what we choose to see, and in the hymns we dare not sing aloud." As the storm outside eased and dawn broke, Poirot walked the cold halls alone, the echo of the organ's lament still ringing in his ears. In innocence and prayer, one may find both sanctuary and deception. But in the end, the truth will always sing its own hymn, clear and unyielding. Chapter 11. The Witness Who Watched Her Burn. He saw everything, yet claimed he was blind. The flames danced like devils on the moor, tearing through the ancient thatch and blackening the night. It was not just the fire that horrified, it was the sound. A woman's scream, shrill and ragged, muffled by the roar of burning timber, then abruptly silenced, a sound no ear forgets. And in the shadows, 30 yards from the blaze, a man sat perfectly still in a wicker chair, blind eyes open, and unblinking, his face bathed in flickering orange light. "I heard nothing," he later told the constable. "Saw even less." Hercule Poirot arrived the next morning, summoned not by the police, but by the sister of the deceased. Mademoiselle Iris Holcombe was not a woman given to panic, but her voice on the telephone had been strained, brittle. "It was no accident," she said. "They will say it was. They always do. But I know she was murdered, and the man who saw it, he's lying." The village of Black Hollow lay nestled among heather and ash trees, far from London's noise and nearer to Cornwall's brooding cliffs. It was a place of fog and superstition, and of secrets preserved like old wine. The cottage that burned, Ashcombe Rise, stood alone at the edge of the village, its remains still smouldering when Poirot arrived. The morning mist curled around the blackened stones, like mourning lace, and Poirot paused at the garden gate, his eyes scanning every inch. The rose bushes were untouched. A child's skipping rope lay by the side path, coiled like a snake, and in the center of it all, where the parlor once stood, was the charred corpse of Madeleine Holcombe. "A woman of principle," Poirot murmured, stepping carefully between fragments of shattered mirror and scorched furniture. "A teacher, an orphan advocate, a woman with enemies, but too few friends." The constable on duty, young Inspector Dreer, seemed harried. "We suspect a faulty hearth or unattended lamp," he said, shifting uncomfortably under Poirot's gaze. "She was alone, There's no evidence of foul play. The man who might have helped, Mr. Orville Nash, well, he's blind, couldn't have seen a thing. Orville Nash, the man in the wicker chair. Poirot found him later that afternoon, seated beneath the willow tree that hung like a curtain across the garden behind his own cottage. He was elegant, angular, with silver hair and eyes that stared into nothingness. "Mr. Nash," Poirot began gently, "you were sitting just across the way during the fire, yes? You heard nothing?" "Not a thing," Nash said calmly. "I rarely hear anything when I sit in that chair. I meditate, empty the mind." "But you did not smell the smoke." "There was wind. The sea air carries all manner of things." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the scream?" At that, Nash turned his head. "I'm blind, monsieur, not deaf, but I heard no scream. I heard laughter. Earlier in the evening, then nothing. It was a lie." Poirot knew it, but lies, told with calmness, are harder to uproot. So he turned instead to those around the fire, to Iris Holcomb, whose grief was laced with rage, to Mr. Julian Brooke, the village physician with hands that trembled more than age should allow, and to Miss Gilda Reeves, Madeline's closest friend and former pupil, now a widow, young, nervous, and overly eager to help. Each had reason to lie. Iris had quarreled with her sister, not a week earlier, over a matter of inheritance. She was giving it all to the school, Iris had told Poirot, to the orphans, to that place in London. It's madness. Our parents would be appalled. Julian Brooke, the doctor, had arrived late to the scene, breathless and disoriented. "I was at the chapel," he insisted. "Evening mass." But no one recalled seeing him there, and he had been treated for burns, a fact he tried to hide. Gilda Reeves, soft-voiced and wide-eyed, offered tea, and too many answers. "Maddie was like a mother to me," she said. "She was kind, but lonely. She had enemies. A man once, I don't know his name, but I think she feared him." Poirot observed, catalogued, watched them when they thought they weren't being watched. The doctor avoiding doorways, Iris clutching her handbag too tightly, and Nash, the blind man, always facing east at sunset, even though he could not see the light. That evening, Poirot walked the grounds once more. In the ashes, he found a melted metal key, oddly shaped, not of English make. And nearby, beneath a layer of singed earth, he unearthed a second discovery, a matchbox labeled La Flamme de Paris. It was not sold anywhere within 100 miles. A key, a flame, and a man who sees without seeing, Poirot murmured. "C'est intéressant, non?" The next morning, the red herring arrived. A child, no older than 7, came to Poirot and shyly handed him a note. "I saw someone near the garden, just before the fire. A tall man with gloves. He lit a match and walked away. A convenient witness, too young to be questioned harshly, too vivid in detail to be ignored." But Poirot did not believe in convenient witnesses. The handwriting on the note was too perfect, too adult. A woman's hand. Poirot returned to Gilda Reeves. "You wrote the note, mademoiselle." She blinked. What? No, why would I?" "To shift suspicion. To protect someone. Or to indict them, perhaps. But you forget. I am familiar with the tremble of a forgery. You wrote it because you believed the man you loved set that fire." Tears welled in her eyes. He asked for money. He said Madeline owed him, that she was cruel, that she humiliated him when they were young. She paused. "Julian. It was Julian." Poirot nodded. But it was not Julian who lit the flame. The final piece came, as all truth must, through contradiction. Poirot returned to Nash's garden, where the blind man sipped his tea in silence. Poirot sat beside him and placed the melted key in his hand. "Do you recognize it?" "No." "It belonged to a music box," Poirot said. "A small French box Madeleine kept on her mantel. It played Clair de Lune. She wound it every evening before bed, but on the night of her death, it did not play." Nash said nothing. "You were once a pianist, no?" A pause. "Before the accident. Then you would know the feel of this key. And you would know this. Madeleine Holcombe was not burned alive. She was dead before the fire began, struck from behind, then placed in the parlor. The fire was staged to destroy her journal and the letter she wrote to the London orphanage. But it failed. The letter survived." He pulled it from his coat. In Madeleine's neat hand, "If anything happens to me, it is because of Orville. He knows I told the truth. He swore he would ruin me." Nash laughed once. Cold, empty. "She betrayed me. 20 years ago. A scholarship, a scandal. She accused me of theft, destroyed my future. I lost my sight from grief. Not injury. Psychosomatic, they called it." Poirot stood. "You watched her burn." "I did not blink. You claimed you were blind. I still am. But that night, I saw everything." Poirot turned slowly, the wind lifting the edges of his coat. "And now, the world will see you." At the inquest, Nash confessed, not with tears, with pride. "She made me disappear," he said, "so I returned the favor." Julian Brooke was cleared. Gilda wept, but her lies were minor. Iris inherited nothing. And Poirot? He walked the cliffside that evening, alone, watching the waves crash below. Hastings found him there and said, "I still can't believe it. A blind man seeing murder." Poirot did not smile. "Non, mon ami. He was not blind. He was consumed. There is a difference. Love blinds us, but so too does vengeance. And fire, it burns more than flesh. It burns the soul." He turned, the wind howling behind him. "She screamed, Hastings, but not because of pain, because she saw who stood over her. And that is a scream no fire can silence." Chapter 12. The Vow That Was Never Hers. Poirot reads the final vow and exposes the true bride. The church bells did not ring that morning, though the wedding had already begun. Instead, there was only the sound of footsteps, sharp, deliberate, echoing along the cold stone floor of St. Evangeline's chapel. The bride's veil trembled in her hands. Not from the breeze, there was none, but as though the silk itself sensed something was wrong. And then came the scream. Not from the bride, nor the groom, nor the priest. It came from a woman in the fifth pew, her voice tearing the air like the ripping of ancient parchment. "That's not his bride," she cried, pointing with a trembling, gloved hand. "That vow was never hers." Hercule Poirot, standing discreetly at the back, beneath the shadow of a great archway, did not move. His eyes, calm and terribly focused, remained fixed on the altar. Not on the bride, not on the scream, but on the small movement of the priest's left hand and the sudden pallor on the groom's face. A tiny sigh escaped Poirot's lips. "Ah," he thought, "the final curtain begins its descent." The story had not started at the chapel. No, it had begun 3 weeks earlier at Willowbank House, a coastal manor clinging to the grey cliffs of Cornwall, where the wealthy Lord Everton had announced the surprise engagement of his only son, Daniel Everdon, to Miss Clémence d'Alcyon, a French orphan of modest means but exceptional charm. The announcement had shocked the small circle of aristocratic neighbors. Daniel had only returned from Cairo a month prior, and though many young women of standing had angled for his affection, he had chosen a relative stranger. Poirot had been invited to the engagement dinner, an unusual gesture. Lord Everdon, a man of stiff manners and secrets, had once been entangled in a financial scandal Poirot had quietly resolved years ago. He had repaid the debt with his silence until, now, Poirot had noticed many things that evening. Clémence's French accent was strangely inconsistent. The emerald ring on her finger bore the engraving E to D. Yet the Everdons had no E in the family. And Daniel, though smiling, had a look behind the eyes that spoke not of love, but of a quiet and growing fear. The storm began the next morning, not in the skies, but in the Everdon home, where the housemaid was discovered missing, her room left in shambles, the window wide open, though the wind howled violently outside. The girl, Lucy Denham, was just 19, barely more than a child, and devoted to Daniel since childhood. Her disappearance shook the household, but Lord Everdon refused to alert the police. "There has been enough scandal," he said with a tight jaw, "and she has likely run off in jealousy." But Poirot, ever patient, ever precise, did not accept such simplicity. He walked the cliffs himself and found something most curious: a single, high-heeled shoe stuck between two rocks. Not Lucy's, but an elegant ivory heel, stained faintly with blood. And further along, a torn scrap of veil, the edge burned as though it had passed too close to flame. "People pretend to be what they are not," Poirot mused aloud as the wind tangled his coat. "But the wind, it exposes the seams." Within the manor, suspicion had begun to spread like smoke. There was Lady Everdon, the matriarch, pale and stoic, whose disdain for Clémence barely simmered beneath her surface calm. "She's an actress," she had whispered to Poirot when Clémence had stepped into the garden. "Or something worse. She's not of our kind." But jealousy can mimic truth, and so Poirot had pressed gently, asking about Lucy, about Daniel's state of mind, and about the emerald ring. The second suspect was Geoffrey Merritt, Daniel's closest friend and fellow archaeologist from Cairo. Merritt had arrived uninvited 2 days before the wedding, and his presence had unsettled Clémence visibly. "She did not expect him," Poirot noted. "Mais oui, that is important." Merritt had been polite but evasive. When asked about Cairo, he merely smiled and said, "Ah, the tombs keep their secrets, don't they, Mr. Poirot?" That night, Poirot found him on the patio, staring at the ocean, with a bottle of absinthe and a tear he quickly wiped away. And then there was Daniel himself, nervous, twitching, and distracted. During a private conversation in the library, Poirot confronted him gently. "You love her, non?" Daniel hesitated too long before nodding. Poirot leaned forward. "And yet, you look as though you are preparing for an execution." Daniel chuckled, hollowly. "Maybe I am." The night before the wedding, the final clue arrived not in the form of evidence, but of sound. Poirot, walking the halls at 2 a.m., heard a strange recitation behind a closed door. A female voice, Clémence's, repeating marriage vows in a slow, deliberate tone. Yet, the name she whispered was not Daniel. It was Elias, and the voice trembled, not with love, but terror. At dawn, a letter appeared under Poirot's door, unmarked. Inside was a single page, written in careful French. The bride is not who she claims. The true bride is buried beneath the vow. Dig where the lilies grow. Poirot knew what to do. The lilies. They had been planted only last month in the old garden by Lucy herself, he had learned. By 10 a.m., he stood beside the sea groundskeeper as they lifted the soil, only to find a second, smaller ring box beneath the earth. Inside, a simple gold band with the initials LD to DE, and beneath it, a blood-stained page torn from a journal. A confession. Lucy had been engaged to Daniel in secret. Their vow had been made under moonlight on the cliffs, just before he left for Cairo. But abroad, Daniel had met a woman, Clémence, or the woman calling herself that. She had wormed her way into his expedition, into his confidences, and then returned with him, slowly replacing the memories of Lucy with a more intoxicating danger. The journal page ended with these chilling lines. She said she would take my place, that no one would believe me. She burned the vows. She took the ring. And Daniel, he is afraid, but not of the wedding, of the corpse that still whispers in his dreams. And so, the wedding began, with a corpse unspoken and a vow never meant to be hers. Poirot arrived at the church just before the ceremony. He watched the bridal march with narrowed eyes. Clémence's movements were too controlled. The lace gloves hid her hands entirely. The priest began to read the vow, and then she repeated it, but she stumbled slightly on the name. I, Clémence, take thee. Elias. The priest froze. A gasp echoed. Clémence's eyes flared wide. The slip had cost her everything. Then came the scream. Poirot stepped forward. The ceremony must pause, he said, not as a suggestion, but as a command. All eyes turned to him. You see, mes amis, he said softly, this woman is not Clémence d'Alcyon. That name belongs to a woman who died in Alexandria 6 months ago, a woman whose identity was stolen by an impostor. This woman is Elise Langford, an actress and grifter once arrested in Paris for theft. And this wedding? It is not a celebration. It is an erasure. Gasps rippled. Lord Everton stood abruptly. Monsieur Poirot. What nonsense. But Poirot raised a hand. I would not interrupt a sacred vow lightly, my lord, but I have evidence. The ring found in the garden. The vow spoken by the bride in the night. And this, he produced the torn journal page. Lucy Denham wrote this before she vanished. She is not dead, merely imprisoned, and I can show you where. The search began at once. Behind the wine cellar, a hidden stair led to the unused tunnels of the manor. There, Lucy was found, drugged but alive. Her first words upon waking. She said, I was never the bride, but the vow was mine. Elise Langford, Clémence, collapsed on the church steps when the truth was read aloud. He promised me, she wept. He said he loved me. Daniel said nothing, only watched her with a haunted look that would remain on his face for years. As the guests left in stunned silence, Poirot remained in the church, gazing at the altar. Hastings approached him. So it's over? Poirot adjusted his tie. Non, mon ami, it is concluded. That is very different. Hastings looked confused. But why would she go to such lengths? Was it money? Jealousy? Poirot stared at the extinguished candles. No, it was the vow. To steal it, to wear it, to speak it aloud. She believed that would make it hers. But one cannot wear another's promise as a disguise. The heart remembers the voice that first spoke it. He turned, eyes solemn. And now, Hastings, the wedding march plays no more. It is a requiem for the bride who never was, and the vow that was never hers.